The sun blazed over Babylon, turning the golden statue into a tower of fire. Trumpets blared, and people filled the square, whispering in awe at the shining image that touched the sky. "When the music plays," shouted the herald, "everyone must bow." But in the crowd, 3 boys stood still, hearts pounding. Could faith really stand when the whole world bowed down? The boys exchanged nervous glances, their eyes fixed on the golden giant. The king watched from his throne, his crown sparkling like the sun. "Bow," he commanded. But Shadrach whispered, "We serve only one king." The music rose. Drums thundered, and the crowd sank to their knees like waves falling before a storm. Only 3 remained standing. Gasps rippled through the square. The king's smile faded. Soldiers turned. In that silent moment, even the wind seemed to stop. No one knew. This act of courage would change everything. Trumpets blared again as the king's voice thundered across the square. "Anyone who does not bow to my golden image will be thrown into the blazing furnace." The crowd trembled. Even the guards shifted uneasily in their armor. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood motionless, their hearts beating like drums in their chests. Daniel, watching from afar, whispered a prayer for them. Could 3 boys really stand against a king? The golden statue shimmered, and the heat of the desert felt even hotter. A soldier shouted, "Bow, boys! Save yourselves!" But Shadrach answered softly, "We serve the living God." The people gasped. The king's face turned red with anger, and his voice shook the air. "Bring them to me," he roared. Dust swirled as soldiers began to move. The moment of choice had come, and courage shone brighter than gold. As the guards drew closer, whispers filled the air like rustling leaves. "Those boys will be thrown into the fire," someone murmured. Daniel clenched his fists, heart pounding with both fear and pride. Shadrach turned to his friends. "We can't be afraid," he said. Meshach nodded. "Even if the fire burns, God is with us." Abednego smiled softly. "Then we are never alone." The crowd's whispers faded as the boys stood shoulder to shoulder. The sound of armor clanking grew louder. Soldiers' shadows fell across them. But though their knees trembled, their faith held strong. Around them, the golden statue loomed like a silent threat. Yet above it all, the sky glowed brighter, as if heaven itself whispered courage into their hearts. The guards dragged the 3 boys through the crowd and into the palace court. King Nebuchadnezzar leaned forward on his throne, his gold bracelets gleaming. "Is it true?" he thundered. "You refuse to bow to my statue?" The boys stood silent for a moment. The fire in the nearby furnace flickered, casting an orange glow across the marble floor. Shadrach spoke, his voice steady. "O king, we do not need to defend ourselves. Our God can save us." The king's eyes widened. "And if he does not?" he asked sharply. Meshach answered, "Even then, we will not bow." Silence filled the hall. The king slammed his fist on the armrest. "Heat the furnace! 7 times hotter!" he shouted. The guards rushed to obey as flames roared higher. The boys didn't flinch. The whole palace felt the heat of the king's rage. The furnace roared like a hungry beast. Flames curled and cracked, leaping high as if eager to swallow anything near. The heat pushed back the crowd, yet the boys stood still. The soldiers tied their hands with ropes. Daniel's eyes filled with tears as he whispered, "God, protect them." The king's voice thundered, "Throw them in." The guards obeyed, but as they approached the flames, the searing heat grew unbearable. The king's own men staggered back, faces burning. Yet Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego walked forward calmly, their eyes lifted toward heaven. Could courage really look into fire and not fear? The crowd watched in stunned silence. As the boys disappeared into the blazing light, a great hush fell over Babylon. None knew Something miraculous was about to happen. The roaring flames swallowed the three boys, and the crowd gasped. The heat was so fierce that even nearby stones cracked. Yet, inside the fire, there was calm. The boys opened their eyes and looked around. The ropes that had bound their hands were gone, burned away. But their clothes were untouched. The flames danced around them but did not harm them. Abednego whispered, "It's not hot." Shadrach reached out his hand. "No pain." Meshach smiled, awe filling his heart. "God is with us," he said softly. And then, through the glowing light, a fourth figure appeared, bright, shining like lightning, calm and strong. The boys fell to their knees. "Who is that?" Abednego breathed. Shadrach answered in wonder, "The one who walks with us in fire." From outside the furnace, King Nebuchadnezzar leapt to his feet. His eyes widened as he stared into the fire. "Didn't we throw 3 men in?" he shouted. "Yes, O king," a soldier cried. The king pointed, trembling. "But look, I see 4 men walking in the fire, and the 4th looks like the Son of God." The crowd gasped, straining to see. Through the shimmering flames, they saw the boys walking calmly beside the glowing figure. No screams, no pain, only peace. The king's voice softened. "Servants of the Most High God, come out." The flames roared louder, but a strange roared louder. But a strange word, louder. But a strange blew through the furnace, and the heat began to fade. The fire dimmed until it glowed like sunset. The 3 boys stepped out, their clothes spotless, their hair untouched, not even smelling of smoke. The crowd parted in silence. The king could hardly speak. Daniel rushed forward, tears of joy shining in his eyes. "You're alive," he cried. Abednego laughed softly. "God protected us." Shadrach bowed his head. "He was with us even in the fire." Nebuchadnezzar stepped closer, his voice shaking. "No God can save like this," he said quietly. The people looked from the king to the boys, their hearts filled with awe. Faith had conquered fear, and everyone saw it. Nebuchadnezzar fell to his knees. The mighty king who once demanded worship now bowed to the God of heaven. "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego," he cried. "No other God can save like this." The people cheered, raising their hands to the sky. The boys exchanged humble smiles. Shadrach whispered, "Even kings can change when they see God's power." The fiery furnace still glowed, but now it was no longer a place of fear. It was a reminder that faith can turn even flames into light. As the day ended, the golden statue stood silent and empty. The boys walked through the cooling square, their hearts full of peace. Daniel joined them, smiling. "You trusted God, and he was faithful." Shadrach looked up at the sky, turning orange and pink. "Even when we were afraid, he never left us." Meshach nodded. "Faith is stronger than fear." Abednego added softly, "And fire can't burn what God protects." They walked away together, laughter echoing through the streets of Babylon. The king's palace gleamed behind them, but heaven's light shone brighter. This was not the end. It was the beginning of courage that would never fade. Years passed, and Daniel grew wise and respected in Babylon. The new king, Darius, trusted him above all others. Daniel's honesty and kindness made him beloved. But not everyone was pleased. The royal advisors whispered in envy. "He prays to his God, not the king," one hissed. "Let's trap him," said another. Daniel, unaware, continued to pray 3 times a day, thanking God for his guidance. As sunlight streamed through his open window, Daniel knelt and whispered, "You are my strength, Lord. Could one man's prayer shake the plans of a kingdom?" Down below, spies watched from the shadows, smirking. They would soon tell the king, and Daniel's faith would be tested once more. "More fruit," the jealous advisors rushed to King Darius. "O mighty king," they said, bowing low. Make a law that no one may pray to any god or man except you for 30 days. The king smiled proudly, unaware of their trick. So it shall be written, he said, stamping the royal seal. The advisors grinned wickedly. Their trap was set. As the scroll was posted across the city, Daniel read it quietly. He looked toward heaven and whispered, I will still pray. His heart did not tremble, for he knew courage is not the absence of fear. It is faith standing firm in the face of. When evening came, Daniel climbed to his room as he always did. The law was clear, yet his faith was stronger. He opened his window toward Jerusalem, the golden sky fading into stars, and knelt to pray. Lord, you are my protector, he whispered. But outside, the advisors were waiting. We caught him, one shouted. They stormed into Daniel's home and pointed at him. He prays to another god. Daniel rose slowly, peace on his face. I pray to the living God, he said calmly. The advisors dragged him away. As the stars shone above, Daniel looked up one last time and smiled. He knew the God who walked in fire could shut the mouths of lions, too. The advisors hurried to King Darius. Daniel has broken your law, they cried. The king's face fell. Daniel, he whispered. He had trusted the boy more than anyone. But the law could not be changed. The penalty must be carried out. The advisors insisted. The king looked out over the city, his heart heavy. May your God, whom you served, deliver you, he said sadly. That night, soldiers took Daniel away, their torches flickering like tiny flames of sorrow. The king turned away, hiding tears. He didn't know that heaven's plan was already at work, even in the darkness of a lion den. The den was dark and deep. The growls of lions echoed through the stone chamber. Daniel stood at its edge, the flickering torchlight revealing sharp claws and glowing eyes below. The guards hesitated. Uneasy, Daniel whispered softly, My God is with me. Then the soldiers pushed the stone door open, and he stepped inside without fear. The door rumbled shut, sealing him in darkness. The king turned away, unable to watch. The night air was silent except for the distant roar. But heaven was not silent. Angels were on their way. Daniel's courage had opened the door for a miracle. The heavy stone rolled into place with a thud that echoed through the night. Inside the den, darkness swallowed everything. Daniel took a slow breath. The sound of claws scraped the floor. Golden eyes glimmered all around him. The lions growled, their deep voices shaking the ground. Yet Daniel did not run. He knelt on the cold stone and whispered, My God, you are with me. A lion crept closer, its breath hot and heavy. Daniel lifted his eyes toward the unseen heavens. You shut the fire before. You can shut their mouths now. A warm light began to glow faintly in the darkness, soft and steady, like peace pushing back fear. The growling suddenly stopped. The lions froze. Daniel looked up, heart pounding. A radiant light filled the den, brighter than the torches above. From the glow stepped an angel, tall, shining, peaceful. Tall, shining, peaceful. His voice was calm like wind through trees. Do not fear, Daniel. God has sent me to shut the lions' mouths. The lions bowed their heads and lay down like gentle lambs. Daniel felt warmth cover him like a blanket. Tears filled his eyes, not from fear, but from joy. Thank you, Lord, he whispered. The den, once filled with roaring, was now silent, a temple of peace. Hours passed, but Daniel never felt alone. The lions rested near him, their heavy breathing slow and calm. One lion even laid its head beside him like a watchful guardian. Daniel leaned against its warm fur, looking toward the faint light above. Thank you for keeping me, he whispered. The angel stood nearby, silent but radiant, guarding him through the night. Outside, the stars shimmered over Babylon, and the palace torches burned low. In the stillness, faith glowed brighter than fear, and heaven smiled upon a boy who trusted without seeing. That night, King Darius could not sleep. He walked through his palace halls, heart heavy with worry. "What have I done?" he whispered. Servants brought food, but he waved it away. "I cannot eat." Every sound from outside made him flinch, fearing it was the lions. At dawn, he rushed to the den, his robe flying behind him. "Daniel," he shouted, his voice echoing, "has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to save you from the lions?" He waited, breath held, the silence stretching forever. Then came a calm voice from within. "O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths." The king's eyes filled with tears. Joy flooded his heart. The stone was rolled away, and light poured into the den. Daniel stood unharmed, smiling up at the king. The lions blinked in the bright morning sun, calm and gentle. King Darius gasped in amazement. "Lift him out!" he cried. The guards lowered ropes and helped Daniel climb out safely. The crowd gathered in awe. The king fell to his knees and said, "Daniel's God is the living God. His kingdom will never end." The people cheered, and even the lions roared as if in praise. Daniel looked up to heaven, whispering, "Thank you, Lord." Once again, courage had walked through danger, and faith had come out stronger than ever. The morning sun rose high above Babylon as King Darius stood before the people. His voice carried across the courtyard. "I make a new decree," he proclaimed. "In all my kingdom, men must fear and honor the God of Daniel, for he is the living God who saves." The crowd cheered, bowing their heads in awe. Daniel stood beside the king, quiet and humble. The same boy who had faced the lions now stood as a witness to God's power. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego watched proudly from the crowd, remembering their own fire. Faith had once again turned danger into glory. Heaven rejoiced. Nushri, God family in city. That evening, the streets of Babylon filled with laughter and song. People lit lamps, their flames dancing in the twilight. "Daniel's God has saved him," they shouted joyfully. Children played, pretending to be lions who wouldn't bite. Daniel smiled as he walked among them, greeting each person kindly. "It wasn't me," he told them. "It was God." A gentle breeze swept through the city, carrying the sound of music and praise. The same fire that once burned in fear now burned with faith. Courage had become contagious, spreading like light in the dark. Later that night, King Darius invited Daniel to the palace. The king placed a golden chain around his neck. "Daniel," he said softly, "you have taught me what true power is. It's not in armies or crowns, it's in faith." Daniel bowed his head humbly. "All power belongs to God alone, my king." Darius smiled, eyes glistening. "Then may your God always be honored in Babylon." The king looked out at the stars and whispered, "Thank you, Lord, for showing me through this child." The palace, once filled with pride, now echoed with reverence and peace. When the palace grew quiet, Daniel returned to his room and knelt by the open window. The same window where he had once faced danger was now a place of peace. "Thank you, Lord," he prayed, "for saving me, for teaching kings, and for letting your light shine in this city." The moonlight touched his face as he lifted his hands in praise. Outside, the lion's den stood empty and silent, a monument of faith. Daniel smiled softly. "You shut the fire. You stopped the lions. You never fail." The night wind carried his prayer up to the heavens like a song. Days later, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego gathered together outside the palace. The sun rose, golden and bright, shining on their faces. "We seen the fire," said Shadrach. "And the lions," added Daniel. Meshach nodded. God's love never changed. Abednego laughed, his eyes sparkling. Then we'll never be afraid again. The four friends looked toward the horizon where the desert met the sky. Wherever we go, Daniel said softly, his courage will go with us. The camera pulls back as they walk away, their laughter echoing through the Golden City. A sound of victory, faith, and everlasting friendship. Years passed and Babylon changed, but the stories never faded. Parents told their children. Once there were boys who walked in fire and stood among lions, and they were not afraid. Daniel often sat in the courtyard surrounded by eager faces, sharing what God had done. Courage, he said gently, is trusting God when everything else seems scary. The children listened wide-eyed, their lamps flickering like tiny stars. Could faith really travel through time, from one heart to another? As Daniel spoke, hope grew brighter in every child's eyes. The fire and the lions had become more than stories. They had become a promise. One little boy raised his hand and asked, "Daniel, weren't you scared in the lion's den?" Daniel smiled. "Of course I was. But I remembered that God was bigger than my fear." The children leaned closer, their eyes shining. "When you're afraid," Daniel said softly, "pray. God listens." The boy nodded, holding his mother's hand. The same courage that once faced kings and fire now lived in small hearts, learning to trust. The stories of faith were no longer ancient. They were alive in the hearts of the next generation. Far away in his palace, King Darius grew older too. Some nights he would walk onto his balcony and remember the day Daniel stepped out of the lion's den. "The God of Daniel," he whispered, "he truly lives." The torches flickered in the wind, and the stars above seemed brighter. He ordered that every new ruler hear the story of Daniel's courage. And so from king to king the tale was told, not of power, but of faith. Even mighty empires could not silence the truth that one child's trust could change the world. Scribes began writing down the stories, how fire did not burn and lions did not bite. They drew the golden statue, the fiery furnace, and Daniel's window open toward heaven. Generations would read and remember. If God protected them, one young scribe whispered, "He can protect me too." The ink shimmered under lamplight as faith became words, and words became light. The stories would travel across deserts and centuries, carried by hearts that refused to forget the God who saves. Centuries passed, but the stories never lost their fire. From Babylon to faraway lands, people whispered the names of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Each time a child faced fear, they remembered the boys who stood for God. Each time someone prayed in secret, they remembered Daniel's window open to heaven. And even now, when courage feels small, their faith still echoes. When fire didn't burn and lions didn't bite, God's love never failed. The same God still watches, still listens, still gives strength to brave hearts everywhere. Generations had passed, kingdoms had risen and fallen, but the story of Daniel and his friends still lived on. Around glowing campfires, parents whispered to their children, "He is the same God, yesterday, today, and forever." In distant lands, where new empires rose, people still sang about the boys who walked through fire and the childs who slept beside lions. Even when fear crept into dark nights, faith's light burned brighter. Could courage ever truly disappear when God was still the same? The answer echoed through time. No flame or fang could ever silence faith. From the blazing furnace to the dark den, every miracle whispered the same truth. God's power is greater than fear. When Shadrach stood tall before the golden statue, when Meshach and Abednego walked through the flames, when Daniel prayed in the face of danger, they all believed the same thing. God was near. Their courage became a song for all generations. And though the fires may look different today, faith still walks unshaken through the world's storms, just as it did in Babylon. As time passed, kings and rulers changed, but Daniel's words remained, "All power belongs to God alone." From palaces to humble homes, people repeated those words when they were afraid. Some whispered them in dark prisons, others sang them in sunlit fields. The God of Daniel became the hope of nations. He was not only the God of Babylon, he was the king above all kings, the same Lord who watches every brave heart today. Children everywhere still face their own fires and lions, things that scare them, moments that test their faith. But the story of Daniel and his friends whispers to every heart, "You are never alone." When you choose to do what's right, when you pray even when it's hard, when you stand for truth, God stands with you. Courage isn't about being the biggest or the strongest. It's about trusting the one who never leaves your side. And in that trust, every child becomes brave. And so the story ends, but the truth never does. When fire didn't burn and lions didn't bite, courage proved that God's love is stronger than fear. Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Daniel were just children with hearts full of faith. And because they trusted God, the world saw miracles. The same God who saved them still listens to every prayer and still walks beside every brave heart. So, when you face your own fiery moments, remember this: faith makes you fearless, and love makes you strong. The God who shut the lions' mouths still whispers today, "Do not be afraid. I am with you."